When a smug liberal car manager mocked a teenage boy just for his last name, he didn't realize he was about to start a war he couldn't win. Because minutes later, his worst nightmare would walk through the door. The air inside Harrison Luxury Motors buzzed with soft jazz and the gleam of polished chrome. It was one of New York's most prestigious car showrooms, the kind of place where billionaires closed deals over espresso shots and silk-tied smiles. But on this rainy Tuesday afternoon, the luxury glint was about to be shattered. He walked in quietly, almost unnoticed. Tall, composed, wearing a black hoodie and jeans. Barron Trump, son of the former president, had come alone. No security, no entourage, no cameras, just a teenage boy with a lifelong love of cars and a curious heart. He walked slowly between the rows of vehicles, admiring the smooth curves of a silver Bentley. His fingers hovered just over the handle, not even daring to touch. He didn't want attention, just a moment of normalcy. But the manager saw him. From behind his glass-paneled office, Rick Davidson narrowed his eyes. To him, Barron was just another rich brat with entitlement stitched into his DNA. The name Trump meant trouble, and Davidson had made a personal vow never to let anyone from that family into his pristine, liberal haven. He stepped onto the floor, adjusting his custom blazer and pasting on a smile that never reached his eyes. "Well, well," he called out loud enough for others to hear. "Looks like we've got a browser who thinks he's in a toy store." Barron looked up, puzzled. Davidson didn't give him a chance to speak. "We don't do TikTok test drives here, son," he sneered. "If you're looking for a selfie, the Apple store is across the street." Several customers glanced over. Some chuckled nervously. One or two looked concerned. Barron's jaw tightened, but he remained respectful. "I'm just looking. I've admired the GT3 for years," he said calmly. Davidson raised an eyebrow, then let out a theatrical laugh. "Of course you have. And I've admired NASA rockets too. Doesn't mean I'm qualified to fly one." Barron said nothing. He gave a polite nod and turned back toward the door. But Davidson wasn't finished. "You're not walking away, are you?" he called out. "Come on, don't go crying to Daddy just yet." The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to cut, and somewhere deep in the silence that followed, a storm was beginning to brew. But what the arrogant manager didn't know was that Barron Trump wasn't alone for long. The tension in the showroom had shifted. Some customers kept browsing, pretending not to notice. Others paused mid-conversation, watching. The employees, young, fresh-faced, all aware of Rick Davidson's reputation, stood frozen, their eyes flicking nervously between their boss and the tall young man being humiliated in front of everyone. Barron stood still. He wasn't flinching, but you could see the hurt in his eyes, the kind that doesn't come from personal insult, but from being reduced to your name, your lineage, your father. Davidson walked circles around him like a vulture circling prey. "You know what your problem is?" he said, loud enough for the entire showroom to hear. "You think just because your daddy was president, you can walk in anywhere and get handed the keys." "I didn't ask for anything," Barron replied, his voice steady. "I just wanted to look." Davidson scoffed. "Yeah? Well, I just wanted a peaceful showroom not polluted with political parasites." Someone near the back gasped. A mother quickly pulled her child toward the exit. Davidson's face twisted into a grin. "Oh, don't act surprised," he barked. "This isn't some fascist country club. This is my dealership. I decide who gets treated like a customer, and you're not." Barron clenched his fists quietly at his sides, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing him falter. Davidson leaned in close, sneering. "You think the world owes you something because of your last name? Let me make this crystal clear. The only thing the Trump name guarantees is disgust." He turned to a security guard near the entrance. "Get him out of here," he ordered. "He's loitering, wasting my oxygen." The guard hesitated. "I said now!" Davidson barked. Barron took one final look at the car he had admired. Then, without a word, he turned and headed for the door. Davidson stood taller, chest puffed out like he'd won some moral victory. But he had no idea. The real reckoning was moments away. Just as the young Trump is about to walk away in silence, help comes from the unlikeliest corner. Just as Barron reached the door, a voice spoke, not loud but firm enough to cut through the air like a knife. "Enough, Rick." Heads turned. At the far corner of the showroom, standing with a mop in hand, was an older man in a faded blue janitor's uniform. Mr. Cole, a man few noticed, even fewer remembered, but he had worked at Harrison Luxury Motors for 30 years. Rick Davidson turned, eyebrows raised. "Oh, look," he sneered. "The cleaning crew's got an opinion now." Mr. Cole stepped forward slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. "You crossed a line," he said, his voice calm. "He's just a kid." Davidson's grin vanished. "And you're just a janitor," he snapped. "You think you get to decide how I run my dealership?" "I think," Mr. Cole said, his eyes steady, "respect doesn't cost a dime. And what you just did, that's not how decent people treat anyone, Trump or not." A ripple ran through the staff. A few nodded ever so slightly. Even the security guard looked uncertain now. Davidson's face flushed red. "You've got one more word," he growled, "before you're on the unemployment line." Mr. Cole didn't flinch. "If speaking the truth costs me this job," he said, "then maybe this job isn't worth having." For a moment, silence. Then something unexpected happened. Barron turned back and walked toward Mr. Cole. He extended his hand. "Thank you, sir," he said sincerely. Mr. Cole shook it with a gentle grip. "Keep your chin up, son," he replied. "They'll never remember the cars, but they'll always remember how you walked away." Davidson stood frozen, mocked, ignored, and now losing control. But the universe wasn't done humbling him just yet. When bullies face someone with quiet strength, they don't know what's coming. But that storm rolling in, it has a name, and that name is Donald Trump. Outside, the wind picked up. Then came the sound. Low at first, like a growl, then louder. The purr of a custom black SUV, its windows tinted, its finish spotless. The kind of vehicle that doesn't belong to someone looking. It belongs to someone owning. The doors of Harrison Luxury Motors swung open, and in walked Donald J. Trump. Not with fury, not with drama, but with presence, that unmistakable stride, that commanding silence that demands attention before a single word is spoken. The room shifted, customers froze mid-sentence. Staff straightened like soldiers at inspection. Even Davidson, halfway through composing another insult, stumbled backward. Trump's eyes scanned the room until they landed on his son. Barron looked up, not surprised, but relieved. Donald Trump nodded once to him. Then he turned his gaze to Davidson. "I hear," he said calmly, "you had some things to say to my son." Davidson swallowed hard. The lion had entered the den, and the predator who thought he ruled this showroom just became prey. Rick Davidson stood frozen, like a deer caught in headlights. But these weren't just any headlights. They belonged to Donald Trump, and the former president wasn't here for pleasantries. Trump walked forward with deliberate calm, each step echoing like a drumbeat in the silent showroom. His presence filled the space, shifting the power instantly. "So," Trump said, his voice steady but sharp, "you thought it was a good idea to humiliate a young man, my son, in front of an entire showroom?" Davidson attempted a weak smile. "Mr. Trump, I think you're misunderstanding. Your son, he was loitering, acting suspicious. I didn't even know who he was." Trump raised an eyebrow. "You didn't know who he was," he repeated, "and yet you made it personal. You insulted his name, his family. You treated him like dirt." Davidson shifted nervously. "With all due respect, Mr. Trump, we have policies about underage browsers." "Policies?" Trump asked. "Or prejudices?" The staff looked on, wide-eyed. Customers stood still, holding their breath. "Let me make this very clear," Trump continued, his tone growing colder. "If you ever speak to my son, or any young person, with the kind of venom I've heard about, there won't be a building left for you to run. Because respect isn't optional. It's the bare minimum." Davidson opened his mouth to respond, but Trump cut him off. "You messed with the wrong family." Davidson's panic was visible now. He straightened his jacket, attempting to maintain composure. "I assure you, Mr. Trump, there's no need for dramatics." "You're right," Trump said, reaching into his inner coat pocket. "There's no need for dramatics, just action." He pulled out a document. Legal, stamped, signed. "What's that?" Davidson asked. Trump unfolded the paper with surgical precision. "This," he said, "is the deed to this dealership. I purchased it on my way here, made a few calls, signed a few forms. You no longer work here, Rick." Davidson's face drained of color. You can't." "Oh, but I just did," Trump replied. Gasps rippled through the staff. The room was dead silent. Trump turned to the employees. "You deserve better, and from today forward, you'll have it." He looked back to Davidson. "You're fired, effective immediately." While Davidson stood in stunned silence, trying to grasp his downfall, Trump turned to the old janitor. "What's your name?" he asked. "Mr. Cole," the man said, almost sheepishly. Trump nodded. "Mr. Cole, I saw how you stood up for my son. Quiet strength like that? It matters." Mr. Cole blinked. "I just did what was right," Trump smiled. "And that's exactly the kind of leadership this place needs." He turned to the staff and customers. "As of this moment, Mr. Cole is the new general manager of Harrison Luxury Motors." The room erupted in applause. Barron stepped forward, shaking Mr. Cole's hand again. "Thank you," he said softly. Trump clapped a hand on Cole's shoulder. "And that Aston Martin you were mopping next to, it's yours. Call it a bonus." Mr. Cole's eyes welled with tears, but he stood tall. A man finally seen, finally valued. As police officers entered the showroom to address the multiple complaints against Davidson, Trump turned one last time to the crowd. "Let this be a reminder," he said. "When people stay silent in the face of injustice, bullies thrive. But when one voice dares to stand up, even the biggest cowards fall." Davidson was escorted out, shoulders slumped, reputation in ruins. Trump faced his son. "Proud of you," he said simply. Barron nodded. "I didn't fight back because I knew you would." Trump smiled. "You did fight back. You stood your ground. And sometimes that's the most powerful thing you can do." The staff gathered around their new manager, excited, inspired. And as the Trump men exited the building, the message hung in the air like thunder. Real power protects, real leadership uplifts, and justice? Justice always finds a way. If this story moved you, if you believe in standing up to bullies, defending what's right, and protecting the ones we love, then don't stay silent. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and drop a comment below. What would you have done if you were in Donald Trump's shoes? And remember, in a world where injustice often hides behind fake smiles and titles, real power comes from those who have the courage to speak up. Be one of them. Subscribe for more powerful stories. God bless you, and God bless America.